Hey there, and welcome to yet another episode of the Virtual CISO podcast. With you, as always, your host, John Very, and with me today, Alberto Yepez. And I certainly hope I didn't screw up the pronunciation, Alberto.
You did not, John. Thank you for the opportunity.
Cool. I always start easy. Can you tell us a little bit about who you are and what is it that you do every day?
I am a venture capitalist right now. This is my third career. And what I do every day is help entrepreneurs build businesses that protect the digital future. I don't want to say cybersecurity because we're in an inflection point in terms of, with all this digital transformation, work from home, and the fact that there's not a single executive, despite the size of a company, that doesn't is not concerned about protecting the information and protecting the privacy of their employees and their customers. So I love what I do. Help build companies. I used to build companies in the past because I'm a serial
You
entrepreneur.
still build companies. You just do it from as a guiding hand as opposed to the heavy
Yeah.
lifting.
So that's what I do every day. I work, mingle with entrepreneurs and help make introductions and try to help them whatever they need the, the wisdom of having made some mistakes and avoid them to be repeated in the future.
Well, as people will find out, you're being quite modest. While you may have made some mistakes, you've also had some giant wins. So we'll get to that. So I always ask before we get down to business, what's your drink of choice?
Japanese whiskey.
Centauro?
Yeah, 18. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I'm also a whiskey. I thought with with the surname Yepez and the fact that you mentioned to me that you're recording this from a visit to Mexico, I thought I might hear tequila or mezcal.
Well, if you put it that way, the cocktail of choice is pisco sour because I'm from Peru actually. I'm originally from born and raised and educated there, and I immigrated to the United States, and home for me is the San Francisco Bay Area. But so my cocktail of choice is pisco sour, and for many people may not know, pisco is like grappa, and is a more refined grappa that is made out of the peeled grape. It's amazing. And be
So
careful
my
having
wife
more
is
than
going
two
to.
or three because you'll be
Uh,
sorry after that.
All right, so my wife is going to hate you because like I'm one of these people I hear these drinks and then I order them somewhere and she thinks I'm being hoity, but I'm just being adventurous.
Yeah,
So a pisco sour.
pisco sour. Yeah,
All right, so I'm gonna have a pisco sour and then I will send you an email to tell you how much I enjoyed it when I get done with it. So
perfect.
thank you for telling me about a drink I haven't had.
Yeah,
There's not many that I have not had, Alberto. I will tell you that, and you came up with one.
okay.
So kudos to you.
Thank
All
you.
right, so I was really excited to have you on the podcast, and because I think you have just an insanely unique perspective, right? You started your work in the technology sector, you've started and sold multiple companies, you've been a heavy consumer of technology services, you've founded a venture capital firm that has invested into dozens of information security firms, you've sat on the board of many notable information security firms. So I think you have a perspective very few people do have about information security. So my first question is going to be an interesting one. If today's you were able to travel back in time to you in 2000, do you think the you in 2000 would be surprised, shocked perhaps by the information security challenges that we still have 22 years later or 21 years later?
I think so. Look, I don't think anybody predicted it because, my first part of my career I spent it at Apple. And in Apple, we thought we could rule the world and change the world, an individual at the time. But seeing some, you know, not want to say failures, but lessons learned, like the Newton. And do you tell me today the iPhone has many of the characteristics of the Newton, but we had to deal with the constraints of a very nice device that didn't have the processing power, didn't have the display, didn't have the network capacity, in the development tool. So for me, I would say yes, I knew the world was going to change, but not this much, and now this fast. I guess the transformation has been rapid and is only increasing, and so which gives us a great opportunity for all of us cybersecurity professionals to make a living and make a difference.
So I guess from my perspective, when I think about this, so I've been in this in information security in dedicated fashion since 2000, and I thought firewalls were going to change the world, and then I thought SIMs were going to change the world. Then I thought PKI was going to change the world. Then I thought IPS was going to. If you think about it, every year there's been $100,000 investment that the CISO of a major organization would go to their board or go to their CXO suite and say, "Hey, I need this," and then we're going to be secure. But yet it's 21 years later, and I'm not so sure that we're any more secure than we were in 2006. I think maybe we're less secure. That's what I meant. Like, to me, I find that shocking, and concerning.
Yes, indeed, because I think we were all very comfortable when everything was centralized, right? Remember the old days of the mainframe, and
Mainframe, sure.
very few people have access to the
Green
terminal.
screens, and
Very,
wide carriage paper, right?
yeah, very few people have access to actual devices in the data center. Where I was going to college, I was doing an operator job as a student operator to learn a little bit of that. But then, as the information started to spread, just with the transformation of distributed computing, client server, the cloud, the information starts just dispersing everywhere. And if you just want to boil it down to what is cybersecurity, or what we're trying to accomplish with cybersecurity, and we don't call it security anymore. Cyber implying that there is an interconnected world, and it kind of is born with the internet being more pervasive and adopted by businesses. So what we're trying to do is protect information, right? We're trying to protect information. Information is derived from data that is processed by applications. They run on a device that has an operating system that is interconnected with a network and perhaps interoperates with others. So if you believe in this tactic, at the end of the day, we're protecting information, and the other days of the mainframe, everything was in the same place. But now, just think of the mobile apps that we have, and they are not. It's called an app, not an application, because it's really a browser that is invoking all these sorts of APIs. You don't know where the information is, or where you're bringing context to make decisions to process this data, and therefore, I think the fundamentals haven't changed. I remember the early days of access control with things that maybe your audience would not know, RACF and ACF2, which was a centralized access control, and we're trying to do the same. Yes, my first company was RACF for the web. It was a web single sign-on 20 years ago. More than that, I founded it in 1995. I remember the Okta founders trying to figure out the success we had in the lessons learned, but it was centralized access control and the privilege for people that need to access to information, try to provide policies to when can they access it and from where, etc. So the fundamentals have not changed. The issue is the technology platform and infrastructure has evolved and will continue to evolve.
Yeah, it's an interesting it is an interesting quandary that we follow ourselves in. So, do you remember there was a one of the I think one of the most fascinating and one of the most predictive things that I ever remember reading was George Gilder wrote a piece called Telecosm. And if you think about this, what you just explained is telecosm, right? He envisioned a world where once bandwidth was infinite or fast enough, all of the individual components of a computer could be anywhere in the world, right? The software, the CPU, the screen, the network. And really that's what you just kind of described, right? That app is really, it's what Gilder envisioned in whatever that was, 1991 or something crazy like that. So yeah, I guess, and the other thing too is I do think you spoke to complexity, and I think complexity is definitely part of this, especially complexity in the continuous rate of change associated with the same complexity. Because I find it remarkable that I can, if you really sat down and thought about it from the time that I click a mouse and you follow the flow of electrons and you follow it through the computer and out, up the OSI model, across a network, back down the OSM model, back up, back. It's actually remarkable. Any of this stuff works.
Hmm.
You know,
Exactly.
I mean, like we get mad when a web page doesn't load fast enough. I mean, we should thank the Lord that the web page loaded at all, from my perspective.
Exactly. You know, e- even before that reference that you have, I would encourage people to go back to a video that Apple put together in 1987 called the Knowledge Navigator. This is when Steve left, and there was a big void of vision, and Scully wanted to be the visionary. And we needed to come up with something that was so compelling that people would say, "Oh, Steve doesn't really matter. Apple will continue to drive the well." So if you watch it, it's on YouTube and widely available. It's the Knowledge Navigator video, 1987. It really shows an iPad and a professor walking in right before class and saying, "Oh, we're talking about deforestation. I need to talk to my friend in Brazil." And basically, it starts a FaceTime video session and says, "Hey, what are the latest things that you have? Oh, let me tell you, this is research that I put it. Let me send it to you." And it automatically shows up in the screen. They open it up, and within 10, 15 minutes, the fellow has all the data that he needs in order to deliver a very compelling class in deforestation. If you think through what the implications of that vision is finally here, because you talked about unlimited bandwidth, unlimited processing power, you know, talk about video capabilities, talk about, you know, APIs in ability to invoke information and share information in a secure way. So it's just fascinating. And I think that the next race is going to be space. We all take it for granted. We all hear that there's a lot of these satellites, mini satellites being launched by SpaceX, and by what the guys at the founder Amazon is doing, and also the governments from India, China, and Russia are trying to do. There's a race to space, and I think we're taking it to that level. And the same questions, the firewall, the IDS, and the IPS, and all the different things are going to be the same thing. But
So
it's
you're saying I'm gonna have job security for a while. Is what you're
yeah,
saying.
because look, they're going to
Except
be
now I'm going to be. Listen, are aliens good hackers? Do you happen to know? Because I know the Eastern Bloc is,
yeah.
and if the aliens are better hackers than the Ukrainians, I'm out.
Yeah.
I'm out. I'm just telling you that right now.
That's why
So it's
we
interesting.
invested in Alien Vault, and we love the name.
Boom, boom.
Yeah, and we love
Boom.
the space, Alien that basically demonstrated a vision. But anyway, sorry for interrupting.
No, I like the Alien Vault reference, because I'm actually a fan of USM Anywhere. So it's interesting. You had me thinking. All right, so we said we're pointing out that Gilder Telecom and Apple's Knowledge Navigator presaged a future, and it makes me wonder what else presaged a future, and I'm starting to wonder, like, as the metaverse evolves, if you've ever read Snow Crash, very famous book, that was the founding of the word metaverse, and then Ready Player One, of course, kind of built on that. I wonder if we're going to, like, if you and I were redoing this podcast in 5 years, would I be making a reference to one of those as being why we're where we are? It's kind of an interesting thought process.
Probably. And the other thing that always get me thinking is Star Trek, right? How you teleport,
Yes.
transport
Yep.
yourself, and have all these, arcane things. But it was like bridging your imagination in a world where it doesn't matter where you are, and you need to interact and save in the last minute because you're in danger, and all of a sudden you disappear. I think you're talking about metaverse. It's the virtual world. It's an economy that doesn't have any borders, with all the cryptocurrencies and all the stuff. Everybody talks about Web3 and distributed applications. I think it's a means to an end. It's part of that evolutionary road that we're going to continue to find in this
And
industry.
there'll be a whole nother set of security challenges associated. I mean, they're already having issues with it. So, all right, I didn't mean us get it on the metaverse.
No
That's
way.
another whole thing.
Yeah.
Like, I'd like to have Chris Dixon on the podcast.
Okay.
'Cause I don't know if you ever heard him talk,
No.
but Chris Dixon, they're one of the best podcasts I've ever listened to. And if you haven't listened to it, I'd encourage anyone listening to listen to this. Chris Dixon and an Indian gentleman, I think his name is it's NAV something. I don't remember exactly what it was on Tim Ferriss. and they talked about NFTs, and they talked about Web3. And it was a fascinating conversation. And Chris Dixon is a fascinating follow on Twitter. He's a brilliant guy, and he comes up with some really interesting stuff. But let's put that to the side for a second. So you mentioned that you were at Apple. So how much were you involved in information security at Apple, if at all?
Really, where I started was in telecom
Okay.
and networking. I was a network design engineer. That was my first job out of college. And what it meant was we needed to interconnect all the business systems to create a unified network around the world. We talked a digital network, digital rings that would bring all the manufacturing systems that were running on tandem computers with all the distribution systems that were running on IBM System 38, AS400s, all the financial reporting that was being running in mainframes, and also all the the Cray computers doing simulation. So as an engineer, I was having a blast because he was interoperating, interconnecting all these systems in a secure form. The early days of the Ethernet cards and how you put really fiber across the campus in Cupertino. How do you create a digital ring between all our distribution centers and all manufacturing centers, not only in the US and Europe and all that. So for me, it was all about information sharing and the ability to access that information. And my next job was even better because since I got so much context on this computing power, Apple said we need to make sure the Mac and our products interact with it. So I was able to run a group called the Mac Technology Group that basically was in IT that was developing applications and developing uh, interfaces into the mainframe, into all the different devices. And had an opportunity to work with the IBM Apple Alliance, with the DEC Alliance, with so much work that needed to be done. There will be a lot of context. And destiny has its ways. If you told me this is what you're going to do, I studied computer science. I
Yeah.
didn't write a single line of code. The world is safer because of that. So let me just state that. But it was just the inquisitive knowledge about how do you share information and how you create windows. And at the time, we wanted people to imagine the Mac interface in front of your app and your reporting rather than just having to look at the green screen that you describe and not being able or generating the report you got to get your printout, and that's the way you got it. So I did get involved early on with my passion of information sharing, and one of the considerations was, is this information secure?
So then you ended up at, if I read your bio right, then you ended up at InCommerce, right, which was an email marketing platform. And it was interesting to me that you ultimately sold that to Entrust, right, which was an information security firm. That was down in 2000. So I'm curious, Entrust as an infosec firm in 2000, what level of security due diligence did they do on InCommerce at that time, and how much did that experience shape your future career arc?
So, and commerce wasn't an email platform.
Okay.
It was a cybersecurity company that enabled commerce, that
Okay.
enable the life cycle, the customer life cycle management, all the way from somebody coming to your website to get marketing information about your product, be able to purchase online, be able to get the support. So we built the very first web single sign-on platform
Okay.
that integrated with PKI, VeriSign, and Entrust in those days, integrated with RSA and all the other tokens. It also integrated with all the directories at the time. Everybody forgets about Novell and others. So we had built the very first portal infrastructure that provided web single sign-on personalization. And this is the early projects where, Chase.com launched, and it was almost letting the space shuttle go to the moon because Chase was one of our large customers, and we were migrating all the customers to online banking. There were 20 million accounts that we needed to migrate, and our technology had to scale to allow people to not only log in, personalize to their own accounts and the things that they were relevant, and try to do that. So e-commerce was the learnings of me leaving Apple and trying to It started as a consultant, like many entrepreneurs, or working with early adopters of technology like Schwab and Cisco and others that wanted to use the browser as a way to share information. And that's how the idea of e-commerce and web single sign-on security came about. So after raising 4 rounds of venture capital and almost getting the company ready to go public. We have the largest banks in the world, not just in the U.S. You name it, in Japan, UK, Singapore. We have the largest telcos in the world. Sun was with our strategic partner. It was a Java framework, and because Sun was pushing Java, we used to help sell E10,000s to just get the portal, the backup, the crash and burn. They loved
Sun
us.
was a monster. People
Yeah,
forget how
and
big
they
a
helped
company
us,
Sun was in those days.
and we were addressing one of the biggest issues for them. And so, short of taking the company public, Entrust realized that PKI wasn't an easy business to be in, other than selling affiliates and selling certificates for web browser for webs, I guess, HTTP servers and VPNs and maybe email security. So they needed to diversify on something that really enabled the business, and for them was a very strategic acquisition to enable. And we brought up a set of customers that otherwise we were talking to the people, what we today call the digital transformation people at that time, eCity and all these towns. There were people trying to migrate into more online business, and there was a fascinating experience, because innovation in cybersecurity doesn't happen in the lab. It really happens by understanding the changes in technology, how people want to interact and facilitate information. And I think the background of Apple, having the center of design being the individual, carry on helping build the products that we did. And we had Okta in 97, 98, 99, 2000. That's when we get acquired by Entrust. And I joined Entrust as a board member, and eventually ended up having to run the company because the market crashed, and have to face the music with when you have a down spiral brand and trying to figure out how do you cut costs and structure and still make it relevant, and eventually help recruit with other members of the board or an executive at our Nortel to run Entrust. And then I ended up being recruited by private equity, and this is my early days in venture capital and investing, that they wanted to consolidate the industry in cybersecurity. And so at the time, Bill Janeway was the vice chairman of Warburg, and he says, Alberto, why don't we just consolidate and buy a couple companies and make the biggest cybersecurity company in the world? And so we said it's not going to be in the network side, because the firewall's already sold. It's not in the, so why don't we do it at the application level? We almost bought RSA, and we combined it with assets of Control SA from BMC. So
At that point, that would have been a really, because you were doing the authentication. Now you had the multi-factor kind of baked in. At that time, RSA hard tokens were the cat's meow, right? That's what everyone was buying. That would have been around late 90s, early 2000s,
early
right?
2000s,
That was it was the height of the RSA tokens, man. I knew RSA sales guys in those days that were making bank.
And Be Safe, remember the libraries, the secure libraries that everybody needed to play.
I wouldn't remember that if you didn't mention it.
Yeah. But anyway, that's how the world of my experience with cybersecurity as a practitioner, as an entrepreneur, working with customers, with reseller, distributors, the different markets, and secrecies of a big, large bank that has unlimited resources versus somebody that is a small team that needs to make sure that they give the convenience and the same quality of cybersecurity, and then how to evolve and think through how do you as professionals, how do we provide that assurance or mitigate the risk that whatever business we're in can help with whatever insights we can provide.
So you just kind of made the jump, if you will, right, from being on the technology side, being on the security side, and into the venture capital world, and that led you to make investments into it looked like 50 plus firms at this point in time, with some really fantastic exits. You mentioned Alien Volt and their exit with AT&T Cybersecurity. There were certainly a few others. So when you're looking, because a lot of our clients are either early stage firms, seed-based firms, some VC-backed firms. So when you're looking at a company, um, what is it that you prioritize? Is it the people? Is it the culture? Is it market size, external drivers, technology stack, intellectual property? What is it that is the two or three core things that make an investment a worthwhile investment for you?
That's a great question. And it's a question that we are often asked. What is your criteria of selecting a company that you want to invest? And we have five areas. One is the market. Second, the intellectual property. Third, the go-to-market strategy. Fourth, the team. Fifth, if there's a syndicate and other people helping build it. Markets, obviously, you look for large market opportunities. They're fast growing markets, large market opportunities. The IP, the intellectual property, has to be highly differentiated and hard to replicate, right? And that's why we tend to invest primarily in high IP content businesses. You will tell you in a moment why, because in cybersecurity, most of the exits are M&A, and the established companies, in order to stay relevant, need to buy innovative companies, and so IP becomes a critical component. The third component is the go-to-market. What is the sector, the segment of the market? What is the pricing? How do you get it to the ultimate consumer? And with all the evolution now, that component becomes probably one of the most critical ones, especially when you talk about the small, medium business, because now security is being delivered as a service, but it was looked as sacrilege 10 years ago. I remember working with Philippe Courtot when we were trying to take Qualys public, and people were so nervous that we were putting all the vulnerabilities in the cloud. And says, wait a minute, now you can deal with that. And now he became a visionary. He became somebody that was way ahead of all of us. And so security now needs to be considered. So in the go-to-market now, the criteria is technology that is easy consumed, easily deployed, preferably using a model that is cloud first, and it's in a subscription manner because people don't have the capital expenditure to be able to buy something big. I'm okay buying subscription. The old world that Salesforce innovated and says you don't need to buy SAP, just pay me monthly and start it small, but then eventually you start paying millions of dollars if you're a big company. And then obviously the core of that company, which is the DNA of the founders or the founding team. Do they have the context? Do they have the contacts and the experience in the area that they think they can address this large market opportunity with differentiated IP, with a sensible go-to-market strategy? And that becomes one of the key criteria. At the end of the day, you're investing in people. And syndicate is more like, companies take time to develop. And if you're the only investor, yeah, it's interesting. But, in the case of Alien Bolt, since we mentioned it, we had some wonderful syndicate members. The company started in Spain, started as an open source project. We led the Series A. Kleiner followed us in the Series B, and then two or three other VCs came in. But we were able to fund the company and transform the company from a community-led business to a much more. It was appliances. I don't know if you recall Unified Security, and people even had problems with memory. But eventually moving that from a physical appliance to a virtual appliance to a cloud native first. And this when AT&T decided that we got to have it because we have such a huge opportunity with that small medium business that we can provide this capability. And for them, it was very strategic acquisition because it enabled them to really get into the business in a more credible way, in a way that there's a community of people that believe that a unified security management framework they had pretty much everything quote unquote built in would address most of the requirements from a small medium businesses. So it was an interesting evolution. So when you apply the criteria, market, IP, go to market, team, syndicate, it's very important. And if you align all five, you have a successful company. If one of them drops, you may have the best technology in a fast growing market with a great team, but the go to market fails, you're done. You may have the best go to market team with the right syndicate, the right team, but it's a market that is very small. So you realize that it's not just one or two. You had to align all five in order to
Mhm.
be successful.
It was interesting when you did them in order before the syndicate. The second to last was people, and I was just curious if there was a relative if you listed them in relative order of importance, and if people were listed late in the process because you can supplement them or replace them, but the others are not easily supplementable or replaceable.
Interesting observation. People is the basis, I think, of the investment. The only reason I put it in that order is oftentimes when you're an investor, your my business today is you're going to give me money, and I need to return two, three, four times the money you give me.
Hmm.
So I better invest in large market opportunities. Okay,
Hmm.
I may have the best team, but if they're going to try to address a very narrow market, that's not
Hmm.
going to. So I start with what problem are we trying to solve, and is it a
Hmm.
big problem? Do the people that are starting this business have the context, the experience, the knowledge to how to do that? People is a constant everywhere. The IP is created by the people. It's not automatically created by somebody in the university. Like I said, it's all about creating differentiated IP that is hard to replicate, but people is the one that creates that IP.
Gotcha.
And
Gotcha.
then
I asked
go to
that because you
market is
see.
people again, because it's people that understand channels, people that understand
Okay,
pricing,
I got you.
people that
You're
understand
putting people
support.
into the like I was because to me go to market is critical, right? Because
Yes.
you can have the best widget in the world, but if you don't know how to sell it, and you're in trouble. So and you're considering that to be part of the people. I just thought once the intellectual property is launched, because I see a lot of venture firms invest into an organization, then you see them replacing people, but still having some success, which is why I asked that question.
Yeah. I think
Um,
we bet on people, and we partner fundamentally with the founders,
Good.
and then we have conversations that are right time. I was a founder as well. We may need to bring somebody to help scale the businesses, but if they don't want to do it, they want to go all the way. We support them and bring people under them that can help them with their blind spots. It's the founder. Some founders love to innovate. They don't like the politics. They don't like
They
the
don't like to
stuff.
manage. Yeah,
They
they're yeah.
yeah. So, but it's more a founder's choice. But fundamentally, Force Point partners with the entrepreneurs to help scale and build businesses. Not, and we have a lot of relationships to bring people into companies when and if the appropriate time is in order to help it scale.
Gotcha. And that you largely answered my next question, which was, you see different approaches in PE firms regarding the core services they provide, and even the level of governance they exert over the organization, whether they run somewhat autonomously, whether they're held a little bit more closely. What is your particular philosophy?
I think you brought in a very interesting nuance that I don't think a lot of the people in the audience know, and nor I knew until I got into the business. Private equity, I guess, broadly speaking, is you invest in equities that are in private companies. But there are three very different plays in private equity. There's
Hmm.
venture capital, which is really minority ownership. You don't control the company. You don't know. You don't own. You don't. You need to work with your co-investors, with the founders, to drive that. In the other stream, the proper PE firms, they buy control, and they're majority investors. They control the business, and if they want to change the CEO, there's no discussion in the board. It says, John, thank you very much. I appreciate your services. I have Mary coming in tomorrow, and make sure you just do the right thing. We'll pay you appropriately. See you later, right? Private equity firms have a very different model of venture capital. They tend to be looking at efficiencies and oftentimes um, invest in companies at a scale or even public companies, and they take it private because they fail to innovate, they fail to grow in a fast pace, and therefore what happens is they tend to, you know, not only bring efficiencies, increase the EBITDA, and then they start buying innovative companies, which are the venture-backed companies. The venture-backed companies is, we are minority investors, and we know that our biggest value is not the capital, is the experience, is the network that we're bringing to bear. We introduce people to the founders. Do you like this person? Do you have the right synergy to be part of your executive team? Do you want this individual to be an independent board member? The things that you perhaps as an entrepreneur never had an opportunity to develop. And if you go to our webpage, forcepointcap.com, you'll see something called the Advisory Council. There's more than 70 people, many of them practitioners, many of them entrepreneurs, that are considered the protagonists of this industry. You have people like Greg Clark that started Dascom, ended up doing Blueco, Symantec, whatever. Now he runs his own fund. You have people like Kevin Mandia when he was building his consulting business. But you have massive CISOs of different big companies and small companies. We have a lot of military background, but all these people won't have the same vision. We want to be able to protect the digital future. And what we do is it's a loosely coupled association wherein the founder wants to help the help of somebody that has technology background on how to sell to the government or how to scale the business. They help you. And for us, they help us evaluate the technology. So don't think they just because you tell me your technology works, I believe it. I said, okay, let me introduce you to Ramin at Jeffries. Let me introduce you to Phil at Goldman. Let me introduce you to Pat at JP Morgan. And they will be the ones saying, okay, listen to the pitch. They try it, they test it, say, yeah, it's good. If you invest, I'll buy it. So reinforce each other, and that's how we grow businesses together. So it's so private equity is not one size fits all. Private equity proper buys control, and they can bring their own operating team, change it, efficiencies, and all that. Venture capital is about growth and job creation.
This was a really fascinating part of the conversation for me because I have always struggled with understanding that. But if I recall correctly, you said at the beginning that there were 3 distinct models, and you really outlined 2, I think.
The middle one, which is the growth equity buyouts, is kind of more investing in kind of the growing venture capital firms that are moving towards a private equity category, but it's that mid-market. And growth investors tend to also buy control because that's the way they can influence. But they don't have the networks and the scale of the private equity firms. No, they have the billions of dollars to be able to take public companies back. So it's kind of a hybrid between venture and private equity, and it's called growth equity. And it's more related to buyouts, and a lot of founders wants to catch up and say, I'm done with these, let me get other people, I can stay on the board or something. So it's kind of in the middle.
Gotcha. That was helpful. Thank you. I never fully understood that. So, you're investing into most of the investments, perhaps all of your investments right now are into security companies, information security companies. How important is it to you that those security companies already have a strong security story to tell their customers? And do you have a preferred approach? If it is a software firm, are you looking for someone who's got demonstrable security using the OWASP application security verification standard, or SAM, or ISO 27001, or SOC 2? Anything particularly that you look for?
Interesting, because it depends. Given if I think most companies now, because we're looking for more cloud native companies and all that, therefore you start with not only SOC 2, FedRAMP, all the ISO standards to make sure that they will, if they don't have it, we'll help them do it, right? And we look at companies when they do development, they have a mature development process where they don't misuse nor license open source libraries that eventually once you go public or somebody's going to acquire you, you have to rewrite because you never paid the license to build. So we tend to be more software investors. Appliance is okay, but we tend to migrate. The pandemic taught us a lot about appliances and how it was hard to even go deploy them and put them in remote locations and everything else. And so we're more software only, ideally cloud native, cloud ready SaaS model from recurring business models, and that's pretty much the focus that we have.
Interesting. And then just on that SaaS model, any particular, is particular focus areas, whether it's identity, whether it's SIMSOC, whether it's where are you seeing the emerging areas that you're targeting right now?
Yeah, interesting. We have 37 companies in the portfolio, so we have the largest portfolio.
So basically
everything. But so
every
we have the new modern SOC with a company called CISO that is all in the back end and has all the what remember the arc sites of the world now. All that's in using machine learning, trying to do alerts, reporting, doing the 80% of
That's
the
a
work.
fascinating area. I've had two guys on the podcast in the last, like, that cloud native, because the infinite scalability, the way, you can leverage functions of service, you can do true real-time correlation. You got these data lakes, so you got like massive data stores. So I'm assuming SciSafe is sort of in that same
Decisive, yeah,
genre.
yeah, and for the mid market, the next generation endpoints, everybody talks about Sentinel One and CrowdStrike. No, we're investing in Huntress. Huntress is an
Huntress.
amazing company. It's a company that is like the CrowdStrike for the rest of us. It's security for the 99%. It's security for the people who don't have the resources. And once you deploy, you go in, you sign up, you deploy it, it's up and running within minutes. Then after the week trial or the month trial, boom, you convert, and you have pretty much 80-90% of what a CrowdStrike or a Sentinel One gives you. Amazing team, former NSAers, understood the MSP market, not the MSSP market. The MSP, which is the Trusted Technology Advisor, my goodness, company's on fire. It's taking the world by storm. But they never see the competitive nature of a CrowdStrike or a Sentinel One because they're playing in very different stadiums.
SMB, SME space.
SME, and then MSP is their core business to go to market. It's an amazing company. We're doing stuff in identity, not only using blockchain and distributed identity. A company called One Cosmos that not only helps you with passwordless, but onboarding and identity verification, and gives you a wallet so that you're able to embed that. So during the pandemic, imagine people being hired, and how do you verify their documents, who they are, how they come in, and how to give them access to different things using the password component to be able to do. And it uses blockchain because it's a distributed identity model that people don't have to deal with. We're doing some amazing work in cyber insurance, as you know, with the advent of ransomware, the growing trend of ransomware attacks. Guess what? A lot of companies either had bought cyber insurance, and the claims were covered, but many of the insurers, the big insurance companies, lost
They're
money.
bleeding money.
They lost money because
and half my customers either can't get cyber anymore, or they're coming back. And the lowest increase that I've seen is 27%, but I've seen 200, 300%.
We're seeing more than 200-300%. And guess
Yeah.
what? That could be sold. You know why? Because there's not a lot of data. You use machine learning predictive models with a company called Cybercube that does that, and is being used by some of the largest insurers in the world, reinsurers and all that. But there's more analytics and predictive models to predict cyber attacks depending on the sector, the segment, and all that. But on the other hand, when you look at cyber insurance, now you could do is a pre-assessment, and there's 8 controls that every cyber insurance, because before it was a questionnaire you had to build. Now somebody can come
I've
in.
been arguing this a long time.
So now
yeah, their due diligence, their underwriting process sucked.
Yeah, but now
And it was, look, I talked to the guys that are in it. Like, I have some good friends in the insurance space. It was a market grab. They all saw this as being the holy grail. They all said, we'll buy the business, right, and then we'll figure it out. They all got bit, so now they're all trying to go back. There's a fundamental flaw though with underwriting cyber liability insurance that it's got to work its way out, because you were at a point where it used to be like someone would come to me and say, oh, we're paying $2,700 a year for cyber liability insurance, but in order to do a real true due diligence on the company for an underwriting process would cost $9,000, right? So like the mathematics of it didn't work, right? The risk management component and what the money they set aside wasn't enough to pay for that. So we've got to get it to a point where those tools, there's a capability for what I think they should do is make sure that if you want my cyber liability insurance, that company has to pay for the due diligence that's necessary to demonstrate to me that they're worthy of being insured.
Very good point. And many companies are beginning to create businesses out of MSSPs that do the pre-assessment.
Yep.
And you have the label, then the insurers come in and say, "I'll pay you." But now, not only have the MSSP for the audit and the assessment, but they have it as a continuous monitoring, so that now you have, at least somebody has invested in these, and they have some idea what it takes to control the environment.
Yeah, exactly. Anything before we wrap up here? I was in, one thing I was curious about. So you've got a stake in Huntress. You still probably have friends over at AT&T. You're going to get them to, they're using Sentinel One. They have a whole big deal with Sentinel One. You're going to get them to replace Sentinel One with Huntress anytime soon?
I I think AT&T is a tremendous machine and great, and they, you know, what we learned when we sold Alien Vault, you know, we were only addressing a third of the market of the small medium business because
Oh
Alien
yeah,
Vault was still very complex. Huntress is that bottom 70%, and
really?
oh yeah,
It's that
oh
easy?
oh,
I'll have to look at it. I have not
you're gonna fall in love with it. So
really.
just keep it in the background. Just is one of those tips that, you know, you'll see, you know, how the world is changing, and how people with very limited resources, the cybersecurity is a part-time job for somebody that has five other things to do. Talk to them about some, or even try it yourself.
Okay, so
And
so you just named every one of my customers,
okay,
right?
that's
You
great.
know, they're under resourced and they need all the help they can. So anything else in your portfolio that's like a huntress, that if you're a, you know, if you're an SME, right? They're all understaffed. They all can't afford information security people with the salary escalation. There's not enough of them, so if they can get them, they can't retain them. Anyone else in your portfolio for the stressed, understaffed, under resourced, you know, 500 person, you know, firm? Anything else that you'd really recommend people look into?
A company called Soul Cyber, SOL Cyber, CYBER, right? It's a modern MSSP that is basically, it gives you the full stack. You don't, you know, and embeds companies from our own portfolio, Area One for email, you know, Huntress for endpoint, CISO for SIM, but it's, you don't have to worry about it. You're buying a ceviche. You don't care about what the fish or what you're using. It's an amazing company. They charge you per user per month, and it's way below what a CrowdStrike. Everybody's trying to do that, and even the Eastern Tires and the world of the new MSS, they cannot even compete. The company is called Soul Cyber. It's based in Dallas, but you know they serve a large constituency. A lot of people in venture capital and a lot of people, venture-backed companies, are going because. And by the way, they're about to launch a program with an insurance company that if you're a user of Soul Cyber, they'll discount your cyber insurance by 30%.
Yeah, we're seeing more and more of that. You know, where these insurance companies recognize that if someone makes that level of investment, at least we know they're fairly serious about it. You know, it's not a definitive they're secure, but yeah, from a probability perspective, which is really what it's based on, right? Is their actuarial data. Awesome. So this has been as good as I hoped it would be. Thank you.
We
Um,
can continue, John. And I had a lot of fun as well, and I know that the time kind of
Yeah,
ran out of us.
at some point, at some point, it would be fun just to continue the conversation. Maybe not on microphone here, because I mean, I would love to learn more. Like just selfishly, and for our client base, I'd like to know more about the products that you guys have out there. It's always good. One of the things that I love about doing this podcast is I'm lucky enough to talk to a lot of early stage companies. You know,
Mhm.
companies that are, you know, in their funding rounds, or you know, one of the companies I just spoke to just hit $1 billion valuation, and like I didn't even know about them, and knowing what they're doing, how they're doing it, you know, it's advantageous to me personally. It's advantageous to our client base and to our listeners. So thanks. So I started I warned you ahead of time because I did a crappy job of preparing you. So we're going to see if you can think while you talk, because you would have had to have done that. So give me a fictional character or a real world person you think would make an amazing or a horrible CISO, and why.
Uh, you know, posthumous, I would think Steve Jobs would be make a
Oh,
both
that's cool.
an awesome,
You worked with him, so you would actually know.
awesome and horrible at the same time because you know he was such a
He wasn't the world's
visionary,
nicest man.
but on the other hand, brilliant, and he always
Yeah.
wanted to simplify. You know, I think if we can all embed that, you know, why do you make technology complicated? The day that he took away the hard disk, the day they took away the CD, we were all saying, "Are you crazy?" And guess what? Look what we're doing today. So I think he would be an amazing driver to bring simplicity and making sure that we accomplish the goal without even feeling that it's complex, hiding the complexity.
That's a great answer. And one of the things that there's one of the stories I love about Jobs is, you know, I think he said something to, and I'm going to paraphrase, you know, if we had done design groups, the iPad would have never existed, right? Like, no, he said people aren't smart enough to know that they need this, but I am, and I'm going to produce it, effectively. And having people with that level of chutzpah for trying
You
to
got
keep the
it.
world polite, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So if folks want to get in touch with your firm, Forge Point, to learn more about the companies that you back, how would they do that?
Our website is forgepointcap.com, like Forge Point Capital cap.com, and you can find me in LinkedIn, Alberto Yepez, and happy to chat with entrepreneurs who are looking to build businesses, or people that have great input, and that if we're missing an opportunity to work with amazing entrepreneurs, just refer them to us, because that's the value we help create.
Awesome.
And thank you for
This has
what
been
you do
fun.
for the community, John. Really
Oh,
appreciate it.
listen,
Because
same to you. I mean, if you think about it, right, there are 37 promising companies out there. No, seriously, look, I mean, I know this is going to sound stupid, right? But I am to a point in my career that part of what I'm doing is altruistic, right? Because I could go sit
yeah,
on a beach at this point, right? I'm sure you could too. You've been wildly successful. You could have probably sat on the beach 20 years ago, right? But you're out there every day, and I do think that there's honor in what we're doing, right? I love your phrase, and I'm going to steal it sometimes. So just beware. I don't expect to hear from your lawyers, but I wrote it down. Protecting the digital future. I thought that was fantastic. Like we try to say that we're trying to protect, the customers. Like we have a phrase: 1,000 customers, 1 million employees, a billion, 1 billion customers, right? Because that's really the reach that even a small company like Pivot Point has. And when you think about the 37 companies that you have, and you think about if you can advance information security as much as you hope, how much value that extends, to the globe, it's pretty fascinating, right? And it's pretty interesting. So kudos to you. I mean, I love people that are making the investment into our future like you are.
thank you very much for the opportunity. Have a great weekend.
All right. Thank you again.